Two main roads had to be crossed, so I planned my journey to arrive at crossing points with pedestrian traffic lights. The second one, inconveniently, had malfunctioning audible signals. As the road was very busy, I dared not attempt crossing. Listening for other pedestrians, I soon enlisted very willing assistance to see me safely to the other side. I then made my way to the roundabout, where I knew the path began through a gap in the wall, which I easily found with my cane. From here, I swapped my cane for my walking poles. This was something of a trade-off, sacrificing the signal my cane provided to others in favour of the safety afforded by the poles. The path is a well-worn track, initially through a wooded area, but it was muddier than I had ever known it before. My technique was to ensure that I was on hard ground, so stepping onto anything soft meant I was off the track. I used the poles for support in case of a stumble, and to fulfill the same function as my cane, a technique that needed to last for the next 3 kilometres. Even the birdsong seemed extra cheerful, welcoming the sudden change to summer weather. I could even imagine the fresh green leaves of beech trees telling the story of new life for another year. After some 10 minutes of picking my way over exposed tree roots, I came to the first unexpected obstacle, a fence that had not been there before. Would I have to turn back so soon? After a little tactile investigation, it appeared Ophelia had delivered a fatal blow to a large tree now lying across the path, which had also brought the fence down. Overcoming this obstacle, the path continued through mud to a point where I expected a sharp left and then a sharp right turn, and sure enough, it did. Now out of the woodland, I could feel the warm sunshine as I walked alongside the golf course to my first junction of the day, identifiable to me by a vague, shadowy silhouette of a lone tree. The steepest path from this junction was the correct option, up a rocky slope, until the next victim of Ophelia, another fallen tree. 2 more turns later, and I was at the top, 250 metres high, with panoramic 180-degree sea views, ranging from north through south and mountains to the west, as I vividly remembered them. Nevertheless, there was a little feeling of disappointment in being unable to feast my eyes on this wonderful vista. From here, I could not get lost, or so I thought. The path levels out as it turns south, and I could look forward to 15 minutes out of earshot of the traffic on the busy road I had left behind. The noise replaced only by the wind and the sound of the sea, sharply down to my left, truly away from the hustle and bustle of daily life. Not even mobile phones can interrupt the sound of nature on part of this path. My next navigational challenge was at the point where the path splits, always a muddy spot, which this time was particularly bad, so much so that the technique of feeling my way with the poles was failing. After some time groping in the mud, would I now have to turn back? However, having tested my walking boots in many muddy puddles, patience and persistence saw me on my way again, and I was confident that I could no longer lose my way. But, for reasons I cannot explain, I got lost again. This time I began to orientate by sound, the sea to my left and the noise of traffic emerging from the right. However, these sounds get distorted by the wind. Eventually, I recovered my path, not before first starting off in the wrong direction. The final 15 minutes, with 2 gates to be climbed, were uneventful until the end of the trail, where there was a tricky piece among some houses where I briefly became an uninvited guest to one. But from there I returned to the busy road I had crossed earlier and now had to recross, this time by sound alone, as there was no one to offer assistance like before. Patience is the key to success on this one, as eventually a calming of the traffic does come. I was now at the bus stop, ready to return safely home. I had succeeded, although I did get lost, albeit briefly, and I did fall in a hole, albeit small, but I didn't have to turn back. What a feeling of satisfaction, although the relaxation normally afforded by a walk like this wasn't possible due to the need for continuous concentration. However, on balance, it was worth the effort. For a visually impaired person, familiarity is so important, and this was another lesson in just that. And as I plan to repeat this walk with some frequency, I will learn some more new non-visual landmarks to make the relaxation easier. And I will take a flask and a snack, so I can sit a while in a quiet spot to daydream and savour the experience. Just one of the things hill walking is all about. Blindness is no barrier to Robert. Here is reproduced an article written by Karen Bushby, originally published in the November 2019 issue of the Church of Ireland Gazette. It details Robert's central role in the redevelopment of Crinken Church Hall in Bray, as well as providing some insight into the challenges he has faced due to his sight loss and how he has overcome them. Blindness is no barrier to Robert. The dedication of the new Crinken Church Hall in Bray on the 15th of September was a proud occasion for project manager Robert Thompson, and it was a significant achievement too, as Robert is almost blind. The 72-year-old grandfather lives independently in Bray, where he moved from Ballyfin, County Laois, where he was 17, to work in insurance. Robert has macular degeneration and other complications. His sight had been worsening gradually, but in 2007 it suddenly deteriorated, and he is now substantially blind. Robert details his experience in a book, Insights into an Unsighted World, published in 2018 to raise funds for Irish guide dogs and National Council for the Blind Ireland. Those early days of near blindness were a dark time for a man who was always working or out hill walking or climbing. Reflecting on that time, a chapter in his book entitled "Is There Any Light Down That Tunnel?" reads, "The hole was deep, very deep, and its air heavy with a feeling of panic." Robert had long accepted that deteriorating eyesight meant he was no longer able to drive. This newer experience was something quite different and distressing. I was facing a world of shadows, isolation, and loss of purpose, he writes. Gone was the ability to read or watch TV. People had become shapes, and buses difficult to see, let alone read their numbers, and all in the space of 2 months or so. Living alone, as I did and still do, served to compound matters. Supported. Robert was supported by family and friends, including fellow parishioners at St. James, Crinken, where he has worshipped for 55 years. Gradually, he began to see light at the end of that tunnel, and set about mending a wicket gate at the church car park. I realise this task may be beyond the reach of many sighted people, but the key thought was that this was something well within my past experience and ability, Robert writes. But a little adjustment was needed, such as how to use a tape measure without reading, or a saw without sacrificing a body part, and hammering a nail without hitting the wrong one. Robert wanted to keep up his skills and interests. The question is, how can they be adapted into a sometimes scary world of sight loss? The human brain is versatile, and with the application of a little ingenuity and the use of other senses, it's amazing what can be achieved, he states in his book. I have lost some things that just don't work for a visually impaired person anymore, but others have been developed as replacements. Are there disappointments? Of course there are many, large and small, like loss of freedom to go where I wish, inability to read to my grandchildren, and many, many more. Disappointment is a poor companion that does not deserve much time, as it only serves as a reminder of what I can't do. I prefer to think of some adventure, however small, that takes me away from that dark hole, rather than towards it.